the bread kitchen. Sourdough bread and rye bread have very distinctive flavours, and you put them together and you end up with something really quite special. In this video I'll show you how to make a sourdough rye starter, and I'll use it to make a rye bread which contains only rye flour. Into a bowl I'm going to add 1 cup of rye flour and 1 cup of water. I'll mix these together into a kind of slurry. As you can see, it's kind of pasty. Now I'll cover this and pop it in a nice warm place. After a couple of days your starter should be all frothy like this. I'm going to transfer it to a slightly larger bowl. I'll then add in another cup of rye flour, mix well, then mix in another cup of water. So effectively I've got 2 cups of flour and 2 cups of water here. When it's all nicely mixed, I'll cover it up and put it back in a warm place for another 24 to 48 hours. After a day or two, depending on how warm your warm place is, your starter should look a bit frothy. Now I'll give it a good stir, make sure it's well mixed. And then into this bowl I'm going to weigh 380 grams of starter. And then add in 90 grams of water. Then mix it all together. Now you can pop the leftover starter into a clean jar. It doesn't have to be sterile, but clean is important. Then drop on a loose fitting lid just to keep dirt and everything else out, and pop this in the fridge. Now just like you and me, your sourdough rice starter will need feeding from time to time, and to do that all you need to do is add in equal volumes of water and rye flour. I've got 450 grams of rye flour here, and I'm just going to add in half a teaspoon of salt, mix it around. Then I'll add in my starter water mixture and mix. Now if you've got your proportions right, you should end up with this very slightly sticky dough, which is more like modelling clay. I'm now going to knead this dough for about 5 minutes, and the purpose really isn't to develop gluten, but it's really to make sure everything's well mixed and even. Now after 5 minutes of kneading, the dough should be a little bit tacky and you might find it sticking to your hands. Just form it into a ball. Pop it into an oiled bowl. I'll then cover it with film and pop it in a nice warm place overnight. This dough has been sitting for 24 hours and you can see that it's expanded. Now then, I'm just going to turn it out onto this board to show you a few things about it. The first thing you'll notice is that it's not springy. And that's because there's less gluten in rye flour, and what gluten there is of a poorer quality too. I'll also cut it in half so you can see what the texture's like inside. So you can see that there are air holes and air pockets in here, but it's not going to be a light bread, it's going to be a very dense bread. So I'll just push the 2 bits of dough back together. It's like modelling clay, it's a very interesting texture. So I've got my dough smooth again and whole. I've just made it into a kind of brick shape, and then I'm going to pop it into my loaf tin, cover again, and this is going to go into the warmest place I can find in the house for another 4 to 5 hours. So this has spent about 5 hours in a really nice warm place, and you can see the dough's risen. It's probably about double the size it was, but it's not going to go any further because the gluten won't support it. So I'm going to slide on a lid. You can cover yours with aluminium foil. This will just help to keep some of the moisture in. And we're going to bake this now at 170 fan oven, 190 normal oven for about 60 minutes. Then after an hour, turn the temperature down to 150 fan oven, 170 normal oven, and continue cooking for another 30 minutes. So after an hour and a half's total baking, we have, ta-da, the loaf. Now I'm just going to leave this to sit for about 10 or 15 minutes before I try and get it out of the tin. And there it is. It's like a little house brick. I'm going to leave this to cool for an hour or so. So let's have a little look inside and see what we've got. very dense. Well, it certainly looks like bread inside, but it smells and tastes a lot like pumpernickel. Slice thinly and serve with smoked meats or cheeses. This bread really is like pumpernickel, and you should eat it in exactly the same way. In the next video, I'll be using my sourdough rye starter to make some sourdough rye rolls, in which only half the flour is rye flour. I hope you enjoy making your sourdough rye bread, and do join me next time in the Bread Kitchen.